Let's start over. Thank you for joining Permission Granted. This is your host, Juliette Ricci Lagman. Today we have a special guest, Chelsea Lewis. She is the owner of Wildwood Yoga in Granite Falls and a great community builder. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you. So great to be on here. Congratulations on the podcast, the book. You are doing it, girl. Nice work.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. That is what this is all about, living our dreams. And that is something that I want to talk to you about today, what you have done with your family and your life, opening Wildwood Yoga and building your community, and then, what your dreams would be in the future, because I recognize even the people that are strong and they go for it, that, we all have dreams that come as we grow and we learn about things. And, it's not the end all be all, there's always more to explore. So let's get started. Let's start with, how did you find yoga?
Yes, beautiful question. I found yoga through my right kidney shut down when I was in high school. I
Oh,
thought, like, oh man, I'm having a hangover. So I stayed home sick and I was throwing up in my bath. My mom came back from work because she realized she forgot something and she found me. The bathtub was green. And I remember looking down and seeing it green, looking up, looking down and seeing it blue.
oh my
And I
God.
didn't recognize her. I was like, get out of here. I don't know who you are. Get out. Why are you in here? So she called 911. They came and picked me up. The ambulance did. And I was in the ICU for 3 months until they realized um, that my kidney had shut down. They
Wow.
thought that I had taken some drugs and was hallucinating. They strapped me down to the bed, gave me a spinal tap. It was wild. It was so wild. And that is when you have your health, I mean, you know this, taken away. You're like, holy cow, that is so important to me. What do I do to get that back?
Yeah, yeah, and keep it and hold on to it.
Yes. So it just pushed me down this quest of how do I heal this body so I don't have to be on these pharmaceutical pills for the rest of my life?
Mm.
And how do I maintain homeostasis in it?
Mhm.
And everything came back to like body and mind connection because you can live a great lifestyle, but if you don't have the mind figured out, that will still cause you turmoil and eventually it will show up in your life and manifest as tension or disease in organs and so I just went down the path and I started practicing yoga. I started feeling better. And someone told me you should get certified because you would have to teach. And if you have to teach, you have to show up no matter how busy your life gets. That's a sage advice.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's a calling. Someone told me one time, if you get called to teach yoga, chances are you did it in a different capacity, in a different timeline or life, in
Yeah.
that you knew it was a shortcut back to yourself. And
Mm.
that's why you're bringing it back now. And I've thought that and I've said that to people, and I found a lot of resonance with it.
Mhm.
I was sitting on the back of the bus in like full lotus position. I would, meditate, and my sister would be like, "Why are you meditating? That's so silly." And I just like knew it made me feel better. So there's definitely some common threads that I would think, you mentioned dream, and it's like a calling or something just placed on your soul. It's not really maybe something you would find the quest for. So I believe that like God had that alliance of like, okay, I'm going to make sure her kidney shuts down at this point in time to kick her into gear. Because one of my sisters is in prison 10 years of her life. The other one just got incarcerated. She's been a drug addict for 20 years of her life. And so, given the experience of life, like I should have gone down that same path. How
Yeah.
did I not? I had the same trauma experiences. And I would say that kidney shutting down just threw me and changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I'm still a mystery. Like in the book at Children's Hospital, they put it as a mystery. They have no idea why it happened to me. It's never happened to anyone.
Ah,
People are either born with their urethra unattached and they reattach it, but they were like, this is crazy. This has never happened. We've never seen this before.
Wow.
It's kind of like a miracle in a fucked up sense.
Yeah, no, it is. And you know what it brings me to, it honestly is I don't know if you know this, but you probably do because my husband Ron was just your student and is going to continue to be your student with yoga teacher training. And you know, he found yoga because I loved it and then he really got into it and it was meant to be. Um but you know he had prostate cancer and the morning after his surgery he first thing he said to me when he woke up was I want to become a yoga teacher and get my certification and I said well then just do it and so he did and it took that sort of like wake up call I guess to help him find this path you know
And
yeah
just to get on it, because the world will push and pull you, onto their paths, onto the
yeah
paths that they want for you.
yeah
And so it's easy to fall, especially if you come from trauma and you've fallen prey to not having a voice and to kind of going with the flow of what others want you to do or expect you to do.
yeah
It's easy to lose that sense of self, and then to reclaim it can be hard, especially when you're really grounded in being the people pleaser or what others expect you to do. It's really hard to be like, oh, hold on, I actually am going to do this instead. And people are like, what? You're going to teach yoga? I remember even when I said I'm going to open up my own yoga studio, the gal I was working for was like, well, that's not going to work. But when it doesn't work, you can come back here and have your job back because we just love having you. And I thought, like, excuse me.
thank you
Ow, that hurt my feelings. I thought, you know what? It wouldn't work for her.
right
That's why she's saying that, because it's not on her path and it's not in her life. And so
yes
she can't understand that and she can't see why it will work, but it will work for me because this has been placed on my heart for a reason and I need to follow that.
Yes, and look how many lives you're touching through, you know, what you're doing. I
And
mean,
how much they touch my life, right? Like
yes,
reflected back to me so much and so grounding for me. Time and time again, I get to dissect this information that's been passed down for thousands of years, and I get to learn it at a deeper and deeper level. I
mm,
get to be held accountable for like walking the path.
mm,
I get to fast. I get to have people call me forward and make me show up as my best self. Like, and maybe some people don't need that as rigorously as I do. And maybe God knew that. And so he put me on this path knowing that I would have to cycle back to this time and time again. But I'm so grateful for how the teacher training has manifested and showed
yeah.
up. It's definitely not my plan. I was thinking I'd live on a beach somewhere, toes in the sand.
But you're in Granite Falls, you know.
I'm in the mountains. Yeah.
Yeah, and how incredible is that that you get to build this place that, you know, people are drawn to and it's, you know, kind of vibrant and modern, you know, in Granite Falls, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing because I grew up here. Meth capital was
Yeah.
like that. That was the big headline. And I was in high school, so I was right in the mix of it all.
Yeah.
And I was just watching people drop like flies, families devastated. The football quarterbacks being hurt their knee, go get on Oxycontin, and then just trickle down that addiction path. And it
Yeah.
was so sad. It was like, girlfriends crying over their boyfriends being drug addicts, going buying pills when like a month ago they weren't that person.
Yeah.
So it was pretty intense. Obviously, both of my sisters taken out by drugs.
Yeah.
So getting out of here was definitely a mission of mine. I was like, I've got to get out.
Yeah.
And people saw that in me and they would feed it. Like I would have my best friend's parents or, one of my ex-boyfriend's parents be like, hey, if they're not home, you can still stay the night here. Like they just wanted to take me in. People
Yeah.
just like were like, you probably shouldn't be around that. And I always look back as my angels. I'm like, oh, I had so many angels like pulling me in close. And
They saw something in you, you know.
yeah, that I, was not connecting to yet. I was still in my own head, but getting out of here and living abroad, I realized, wait, Granite Falls is so beautiful. Like it's a place you would travel to camp. It's a place you would go to escape and hike. It's
Mm.
not this dirty, drug addicted, filthy place. Yes, it has that, but that's not it. So
Yeah.
when I came back from that expedition, I realized my framework, my perception had changed. And instead of people being like, oh, you're from Granite Falls and like giving me this disgusted face, I would be like, I love that you don't want to go there. I don't want a bunch of people to move there. Like,
Yes.
I like having clean rivers and fresh trees. And I love that I live in the place where you go to camp and hike. Like,
Mm.
it's so serene and beautiful. And I found this deep appreciation for it. And so when God put it on my heart to open a studio there, and I was like, help the community, help
Yes.
those kids that were born of those addicts I went to school with and give them a place to like find themselves.
Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
gift.
So what my question is, and this is, and we don't have to know the answer, but here's my question. How do we as humans find the calling without needing a medical diagnosis? I mean, without something drastic?
I don't,
That's a big question, I know.
well, and I think there's a lot of layers to it. One is like a value system, right? Like where are we placing our value? Is it in the material world? Is that the most important to us? In times of in your life, maybe. And if
Yeah.
it is, you're going to have to play by the book, and your calling might be to make a bunch of money to have all the things you want to have. In
Yeah.
your big catastrophe to find your soul might be when you get all that money and you get the big house and you still feel really alone and empty inside. And that's kind of like your health crisis.
Ah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so, they say the biggest way to shape a brain, if we're like on a physical level, is through trauma or repetition. So I
Oh,
would say, like, we kind of do need that traumatic intervention just to shake us and wake us up
yeah.
because this world is so good at the repetition. Your
Oh,
school is repetition and it's programming you to work a certain amount of hours, constantly. What kind of job are you going to have when you're older? Who are you going to be when you're older? Are you going to university? You better go to university. Like
yeah.
they constantly are programming you into that. Commercials, your parents watching television, the news, reading the
Around.
news,
Yeah.
billboards, ads. And so the world's got the repetition, and we know repetition or trauma program the mind the
Mm,
quickest and have the biggest like ploy to have what's top of mind.
yeah.
So the trauma, I think, is the best thing, unless you have someone close to you. Like my mom, once she did her healing, she was very quick to become my repetition. Oh,
Oh,
you're not saying what you need again. Okay, well, nobody can read your mind, Chelsea. You got to start speaking up. Oh, here you go again. I know you want to do that, but you need to ask for it. And
yeah.
so if you're lucky enough to have someone around you that could pull it out of you, I think you could be pushed on your path a lot quicker or encouraged to like
Yeah.
explore that. And
Yeah.
some traditions are. So the Native American tradition would do the journeying into the woods. At a
Mm,
certain age, you'd go into the forest by yourself, stay
hmm.
there for 24 hours and fast. And
Yeah.
at some point, you would turn inward and you would hear your soul's calling. You would
Oh,
talk to your soul and or talk to your higher consciousness, great spirit.
yeah.
And in my yoga teacher training, one of the people was a Native American shaman, and he had us all do a 24-hour soul quest
Oh,
in silence. And then in Psi, I did the Psi People Synergetically Interconnected or Personal Success Institute. My mom had taken it and got a lot out of it. They did the same. They talk about repetition or trauma, and they did a 24-hour for the women's leadership. They sent us into the forest, different spots. You weren't allowed to see anyone or talk to anyone, no devices, nothing, off grid. 24 hours, no eating, just fasting. Go explore yourself and see what shows up.
yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
same, I found this ashram when I was in Australia, and they had a whole silence thing for 24 hours. You have to be by yourself in silence. And I think so all those cultures and all those practices are geared to give you that. Whether that's probably a traumatic experience for most people to go by themselves for 24 hours and be alone in the woods.
Sounds like heaven to me.
I remember being terrified at first, like, dude, what if someone comes up, like all those scary movies, like what if someone comes up
Yeah.
and I'm a tiny girl and like rapes me and nobody
Yeah.
finds me? Like, what if someone's gonna come kill me? And what if I starve to death? But then after that fear, it's like you
Bliss.
surrender.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's freedom. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I feel like, we obviously we could all use some of that. And there is so much distraction. I know through, COVID and we always talk about COVID, but I was distracting myself with workaholism. I definitely was just work, work, work because I didn't want to deal with myself. I just, ignored it. And it was like, it felt like 3 straight years of doing that, until I got completely burnt out. So, yeah, but regardless, there's so many ways to distract yourself, including, Ron will point out to me playing music, like sometimes he's like, why don't we just have quiet, in the car or something? And I'm like, yeah, why don't we? Why does there always have to be something,
And I feel like we're taught that, right? We're
Yeah.
taught to always have something. And I would say that's that ploy to keep pulling you and tethering you along.
Yeah.
Uh, and we've gotten really good at accepting it
Mm,
and not having people like your husband. You're really fortunate to have him in that sense because there's not a lot of people that don't have someone to challenge them. So when they listen to the podcast on the way home, then they get home and they turn on their TV or surf Facebook and then they're listening to more podcasts, which is great.
yeah.
Listen to podcasts. There's amazing music out there. Dance to it, make love to it, enjoy the music. Music is so healing and beautiful. And like, let's practice sitting in silence
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've forgotten how powerful that space is. And in a yogic term,
Yeah.
in even yogic and biblically, I would say both are like go away in silence. Go
Mm,
away in silence. And why are those such prominent things in the Bible and in the Yoga Sutras? Because there's something there for you.
yeah. They're
And
powerful.
why are we harvesting people's attention right now? Because the opposite, if they had their attention, they might be doing something with it.
Yeah. And they might, be able to look at what's really going on,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then
As
really make
opposed
some
to like,
changes or
yeah.
come together. Absolutely. I want to ask you a question. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So, when did you decide then to write your book?
Yeah. Um, so, through maybe the middle of COVID, I was trying to write my second book and it was poetry. It was going to be a poetry book. And the reason for that is I thought, oh, I'll collaborate with an artist so I can just, take care of that. And then I'll do a poetry book and that'll be sort of a quick way to, publish my next book or easy way, I guess is how you would say it. And then it evolved once I had sort of I had tried to do a straight memoir and it just wasn't happening. And the way my brain works, it doesn't lend itself because I need that creative edge. I need that artistic piece, looking at the mixed media painting that I do and I write in it, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into writing a straight memoir. Just it's so black and white for me. I need color, and I need
Yeah,
mess. So I hired a book coach January of 2024, and that was the best thing ever. And she really helped me. What she did, I gave her my ideas of what I wanted to do. I put together a healing scrapbook, if you will. And then she said, instead of going into a more linear way of writing this, why don't you lean more into yourself, who you are, and the artistic way? And so that's when it really just was like we went 100 miles an hour. And I connected back with Sarah, my graphic designer, and then we just made it happen. So, yeah,
I love it. And I think what's really amazing about is this your second book then? Be Like Water?
yeah.
Okay. I'll have to look at the first one. What was that one called?
The first one's the Juliette letters, and that one actually was just a compilation pretty much of my paintings. Not all my paintings, but like select. So it was like plug and play. They were ready to go.
Yeah.
And this one was a lot of deep work and more of the times, if you will. Yeah.
And I would say you do a very masterful job at the artist, the introspective, and the realness of life, which is so relatable.
Yeah.
One uh, part I really enjoyed that you bring all three components to is the red vacuum story
Oh,
about your mom.
yeah.
And I love that you tell the story and you're captivated by the story because you're like, okay, there's some tension here, there's some drama, like what's going on between these two. And then at the end, you share your perspective of like, oh, and I realized this is me not feeling heard.
Yeah.
This is me not being taken, I think you said seriously, like
Yeah.
I have felt my whole life. Um, and I think that's it. I think that's the juiciness of life is
Mm.
sometimes we never get to that
Yeah.
thought of like, okay, I could be annoyed with my mom. I could be annoyed she's shifting subjects.
Hmm.
But what's beneath that that's actually really fueling this annoyingness is, oh, I haven't felt heard. I haven't felt like she's paid attention to me. And
That's
then
it,
that healing comes in.
yeah, that's so interesting because um I think about this a lot. You know, us people pleasers, which I definitely am recovering from. You know, it's like you sort of take it and take it and take it for so long, and then finally something happens and you snap. And that's what happened to me. I was like, I just can't do it anymore. So I literally all told, I can't remember exactly all that I put because I did take some out in the
Yeah.
book, but I literally, you know, took the vacuum and I threw it under the porch. I'm like, I just cannot put this vacuum in my car to take it away. I just physically cannot do it. And that's the day I called my brother, bless his heart, and I said, listen, I just need a break. I need a break from mom. So he, on my behalf, spoke to her and said, hey, Julie, and that's what my family calls me, is going to take a 4 month break. And that 4 month break turned into a 4 year break. But it
Wow.
was the best thing I ever did. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so coming out of that 4 month, 4 year break,
Yeah.
now how are you and mom?
Yeah. So through writing this book, that was a huge healing. And it was so much more than I could have ever expected. I thought, oh, I'll write this book and then I'll go on my merry way, but it actually was a complete healing and then some. So finding my freedom from after the timing of completing that book and then, you know, medical issues and all of that. And then it just was like a super rocket ship. So all told, after the book was published, I started speaking with my mom again. We're not like super tight, but we're
Yeah.
cordial. And, you know, I still have boundaries. But you know, my brother gave me good advice on how to, you know, have a relationship with her actually, and that was really wonderful. And you know, I'm at peace with all of that. So yeah.
That is so wonderful. And I think that's just important for both of you, right? Death is something we all are going to experience. And I believe that the soul can hang on for a longer time than needed.
Yeah.
Uh, and so as we get closer, I think it is important to let people know, like, hey, I forgive you. You
Yeah.
know, even if they're not willing to really maybe take accountability for their actions yet, but still just letting them know, like, all is well. If you
Yeah.
died tomorrow, I want you to know,
We're
no bad
good.
here. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And what I learned through this whole thing, and this is really amazing, is that, you know, I was resentful towards her for all those years, but it actually wasn't, you know, I found, oh, I just need to forgive myself. And that equaled freedom. And it was such a clear path once I finally got to that point. You know, I wasn't really mad at her. I was mad at myself for not loving myself. I just didn't
Mhm.
know how, you know. And once I finally sort of through a lot of help, you know, learned to do that, then I was like, oh, you can just let this go now. Now you can be free. And that's the whole point. Forgiveness equals freedom. You know, holding on to that resentment and keeping myself small and angry, you know, and then once I learned to forgive myself, then I had freedom to go live the life of my dreams. Like it was so clear, Yeah.
We do like it's like 1 or 2 of teacher training. We do the 3 R's, which is resistance, resentment, and revenge.
Yes.
And where in your life are you experiencing these? What are you holding on to? And we do some journaling prompts with them. And then ultimately, it kind of comes to a head, a guided meditation of bringing whoever into your mind. And sometimes people don't exactly know, right? They're like, I feel like I've done the work. I've forgiven everyone. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm not resisting anything. And I'm like, okay, well, just lay down and close your eyes then. And then allow whoever needs to show up and have this dialogue. And we go through some dialogue back and forth. And then ultimately it's, hey, I forgive you
Yeah.
and I set you free. And then telling yourself too, hey, I forgive you and I set you free. And I cannot count how many people have gone away and then wrote me years later saying like, hey, I just got in a fight with my brother, my spouse, my mom. And I closed my eyes, visualized them, and I said, hey, I forgive you, I set you free. And the next time I saw him at a holiday, I didn't feel any anxiety, I didn't feel any energy about it. I had, so thank you for that gift, that tool. And I think that's something we all naturally carry, is like microaggression. And
Oh
we
yeah.
don't always have the communication set up for us or the other person to have the dialogue we might need to have, you
Yeah.
know. And so I think meditation's a great way where we can still have those harder conversations
Yes.
for
Yeah.
ourselves to get to that peace and forgiveness.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't that what we all want? I just want peace, and looking at everything going on in the world right now, and, even driving out in the mean streets of Everett, on Evergreen Way, it's like you feel the anger and the tension. And I'm like, wow, I wish we could just all step back and go, hey, everybody's going through stuff, and you can't always see it visually. So let's just be kind to one another.
Yes, yes. And kindness isn't always nice,
Yeah.
right? And that's the people pleaser side, is like, let's all be kind and let's call each other out when we need to.
Yes.
Let's say, hey, I love you enough to say, like, I noticed you're doing this and it's not actually serving you. It's actually stealing your joy, and you're not showing up as your highest self. And I know that you are better than this. I know that you don't want to show up like this.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then they're like, ah, shit, you're right. I don't want to show up like this. And so it's kind of like kindness is such a dance sometimes. Because when I was taught kindness as a kid, it was like, sit down and shut up. Don't make a wake in the water. Like,
Yes. And that's not being kind to yourself. Let's face it, and it's not being kind to the other person. Calling someone out because I come from customer service world, in the customer service world, or, obviously friends or family. I recently had a thing happen with a very close friend, and I had to draw the line in the sand. Normally I would take it, but I was like, no, you hurt me deeply, and I had to just stop. And my hope through that experience in naming it was that, the friend would say, oh, yeah, I need to do better. And, I can't, I have to be careful with what I say, and it has an effect on people.
yeah. And you can come together stronger.
Yeah.
I was at this wedding one time, and the father of the bride said, remember, the angels are jealous of us.
Ooh.
And I thought, well, that's odd. Like, why would they be jealous of us? I'm jealous of them. And he said, because we have emotions. So don't be afraid of your anger, your frustration, your sadness.
Yep.
Lean into those, because
Yeah.
we might not have them in the next world. And I
Yeah.
think like there is a beauty to that. There's a beauty to not being like, I don't want to always be happy and calm.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a human, and I have to trust that whoever sent me here, maybe it was my choice, maybe it was God's choice, but I have to trust that like this full spectrum experience of emotions was something I agreed upon and maybe even was excited about. Like,
Yes. Yes.
there's lots of theories about heaven and the afterlife, and it's like you would probably get bored of all the greatness all the time. You are kind of like, man, I really wish I would feel sad or something right now. Like,
Well, the duality, this is what I've learned, you can't have darkness without the light, and vice versa. So, it's the goal is, we learn in meditation, is everything we want to be neutral, right? But of course, joy is an amazing feeling. So yeah, lean into the joy, you know. When I completed my radiation, I was strong all the way through it. And the last day, the care team, they were amazing. They gave me a certificate and they signed it and it was amazing. And they handed it to me and I walked outside and I just started bawling because I'm like, I made it through. And you know what? I sat in the car and I let myself bawl for quite a while. I was like, you know what? This is beautiful. I needed this. I needed this cathartic. And it was amazing too. I was leaving the hospital and there was a gentleman walking a dog and he was kind of in front of me. And then his buddy had a dog walking behind me and they were walking me up the hill. And I'm like crying. And they were like, you take care now. You know, it was just kind of a beautiful moment.
And
Yeah.
you have to like hold it together to the finish line, right? Because it's like you don't want to cry and your immune system be like, oh no, we are weak. This is terrible. Like you're holding on to that strength that, like, I
Yeah.
got this, I'm a survivor. And then you get to the finish line and you're like, okay, now I can rest.
Yeah.
And I think people oftentimes get that like upset with themselves for some of their cloaks that they wear from their trauma is like they had to be maybe manipulative or maybe liars or maybe
Yes.
delusional to survive whatever traumatic experience they had. And then they kind of become that character in life because they were a child when their system created that
Survival.
protection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they never like let themselves put it down and
Yeah.
then let it go and then just feel the pain of all of that trauma.
Yeah.
And
Because you're
then they
just
get to,
trying to get through, you know.
yeah. And sometimes getting through it, you become it, right? Like you become, and so I think it's so healthy. And this just shows that you're at a healthy mental state is that you could take the cloak off, take the
Yeah.
strong girl, I got this, I'm going to be fine off, and
Yeah.
take the rawness and sit in it and sit in the fire and let that fire purify you, let you feel it. And then now I can let it go.
Yeah, Pima Chodron, because I love Glennon Doyle, and she talks about this in her book, Love Warrior. She calls it hot loneliness. Sit in the hot loneliness. It's like, yeah, yeah, it's
Yes.
just part of the experience, you know, to just soak in that.
And
Yeah,
I think right now we're in such a pivotal time of teaching people that,
yeah,
teaching people, hey, go back and feel it, whether that's in, you know, EDMR therapy, in some sort of talk therapy, regression therapy, somatic experiences, breath work, meditate. There's so many avenues right now where we're having people have to go back and feel it,
yeah,
heal it, release it, come back, choose a new way.
yeah, yeah. Energy healing, absolutely.
Well,
All,
in our go
yeah.
for
I was just gonna say all of it is valid.
in our previous generation, because people are like, you know, well, my parents could have done better. It's like they couldn't have because their previous generation came from the Great Depression. They
Yeah,
surely could only be survivors.
yeah,
Literally, like all you can think of is food and shelter. And
yeah.
then that next generation was raised by those survivors. So they still have some sort of survivor complex of like it all could go to hell any second.
So
And
that's
they
why
didn't
we
have a lot.
hold on to everything.
Yep, exactly. Exact. Because, yeah,
Yeah.
they can't. Because if you don't throw away those canned foods that are expiring, the depression might come and you'll never get them. And their parents, repetition, there we go, programmed them to believe in all that.
That
And
is
so
deep.
we're the first generation to have some sort of like ability to maybe come up for air. Like they were pretty much drowning or treading water. And we're kind of like, okay, we have enough means to survive. Now, what do we do with it? Okay,
Yeah.
let's kind of dissect ourselves here and see what's really happening beneath the surface because I don't feel peace. I don't feel comfort, even though I'm doing X, Y, and Z, which I was told to do.
Yeah, I'm being a good student. I'm obeying the rules and I'm miserable.
Yes, and
Yeah.
what a blessing, excuse me, to live right now
Mhm.
and to explore these modalities and learn about ourselves and the next generation. I mean, I think they have even more opportunity to kind of shift the way things are going.
Yeah.
Seeing that we've done, you know, like you, we worked 3 hard years. We were a
Yeah.
full blown workaholic.
Yeah. Full blown.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Um, I want to incorporate into a little bit about Ron had mentioned to me that your first experience of, I want to say, yoga teacher training abroad and the travel piece, and then opening your studio. Can you tell me a bit about that journey?
Absolutely. So like I said, I was in Granite Falls and I was working at the restaurant right across the street from my current studio, the little
Wow.
pizza place.
Yep.
And I had been waitressing since I was 16, so just doing that really, and then teaching yoga on the side. I was going to Everett Community College, and I was in business classes in psychology. And my business professor was like, first of all, he was like, "You have extreme ADD," and I was like, "That is so rude. My mom just told me I need to go for runs and drink water before I sit down to learn things." My teacher's like, she has ADD. My mom's like, she's fine. Just send her outside. So he's like, I don't think you should be here. You should go open a yoga studio. Like, you're ready. You know what you're doing. You wrote the business plan. Get out of here. You're wasting your time and money. And I was like, okay.
Thank you.
And then I'm working at this restaurant and it's family owned, 20 years. And I'm saving up money, saving up money. The son who's running it is helping me like take money. We went and bought some buses from a church and went and scrapped them at our friends' metal yards. We're like doubling money all of a sudden. So now I'm saving up. I got 5 grand, I got 10 grand, I got 15,000. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to open a studio one day. Like, God, show me where it should be. What am I supposed to be doing? Because I was thinking like Lake Stevens, Arlington, and be
Yeah.
like, get out of Granite, make more money, more population.
Mhm.
And the son's like, okay, but if you're going to really open this business, you need to go somewhere. Like, go travel before, because when you get back and you open business, you're going to be stuck here. Like, this is like having a baby.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that probably sounds like smart advice.
Yeah.
And so we were looking up different programs and we found this one in Indonesia.
Mm.
And I thought, well, this sounds fun. It's with this business that's been around for a while. They're only taking 20. This is their first time going to Indonesia. So I'll fly in, do it, fly out.
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, of course, one of those angels showed up and she was a cook at one of the other restaurants and had heard, it's a small town, that I was thinking about going to Indonesia. So she comes into the restaurant and she introduced herself and she's like, hey, if you go to Indonesia, my family's going to take care of you.
Oh,
Will you bring them stuff for me? I haven't seen them since I've come here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I just took it as a sign. Like, obviously, God's going to protect me. We're good. And
yeah.
plus, let's face it, my two sisters are, living wild lives. My biological dad was a wild man. So, like, what's the fucking worst that can happen? I've seen a lot of hardness around here. Might
Yes.
as well go abroad. And so I ended up going to Indonesia and had a wonderful time. They had a good balance of yoga and then again the Native American, the shamanic experience, which my
Mhm.
grandma was Native American, and so that kind of spoke to that ancestral part of me.
Wow.
And my teach out was only 15 minutes. I, couldn't even do a headstand. The anatomy was way over my head and under my feet. And so I thought, well, whatever, this is great. So one of the girls was like, I'm going traveling. You should come with me. And I had a bunch of money in my account. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, well. So they were older than me. And so we had went and backpacked to Thailand. And then another one of the girls lived in Australia and she wrote me, she's like, you should come nanny for me. Like my ex-husband is really wealthy and he'll pay you a bunch of money every week if you just come over. So then I went to Australia and lived with her and nannied for her. And I got a couple jobs teaching. There was this one woman who came and she taught me Kundalini. She was like all in white. She had like a posse of people. She like came to the house to meet me. She's like, this is what you're going to be teaching. I'm like, I have no idea what this is. She's like, just you're going to teach it. These are the parks you go to. This is how you do it. So I learned her sequence. I have no idea what Kundalini is. I have
Can you explain for the listeners what it is, essentially?
Yeah, so Kundalini is all about activating your energy. And the concept is that we have this energy locked in our sacral at the base of our spine. And that the more we move and breathe and set the intention of pulling this energy up, this female energy up, to meet with the masculine energy up in the pineal and pituitary gland. That's the spiritual aspect of it is awakening the energy, kind of like awakening the chakras or like having a spiritual awakening. The amazing physical aspects is like you do have cerebral fluid, which travels up and down your spine, which
Yeah.
normally people who have had head injuries, if you've been on a car accident or something, their butterfly bone that pumps the cerebral fluid up and down is stuck or jarred because it's by connective tissue. So
Oh,
they're not getting the proper amount of cerebral fluid. And so by doing these things, you're actually freeing up the tissues and the nerves and the freedom of the fluid to start to move.
wow.
And like Wim Hof did have you ever read Wim Hof's book?
Yes, yes.
So he does where he only heats up his hand 5 degrees hotter than the rest of his body. And
Yeah.
he does it through intention and sending the blood flow there with his breathing exercises. Kundalini is the same thing, right? You're sending the intention of controlling your body and directing the energy or the fluid up. In my friend who is a healer as well has that same belief in the Native American tradition of being able to control your body by being just so interconnected to it. I
Ah,
have like heard all these threads of this capacity, but I never really experienced it by any means.
yeah.
So I started teaching Kundalini. That was my first style, not what I was certified in, not what I was certified in intuitive flow, which means you just listen to your intuition and flow with it. Sounds
Yeah.
beautiful. And then after that, I ended up coming back to, it was like around Christmas, and my mom's like, missing me. Obviously, I'm missing her. And my visa was expiring. So I figure, oh, I'll go see my mom and then maybe just go back abroad. Really, I was loving the sunshine, the beaches, the different cultures. So I come back here and totally done. I'm like not even opening a yoga studio at this point. I'm just going back to the
You're
beach if I
ready to
can.
roam. Yeah.
Yeah, fully in my own selfish goggles of life now. My mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
My sister was getting deeper into her addiction. She had a 2-year-old at the time. So I get here, I start to help my mom, take care of my mom. She's sick, she's passing away. I was
Mm.
fortunate enough to hold her hand, to be with her, to walk her to that experience.
Wow.
Um, and then that was such a blessing in just showing the veil between this life and the next is very thin.
Yeah.
And having those last kind of just moments with her
Yeah.
deeply impacted me. I've always thought in my later years, I'll, maybe be a death doula or somebody who would help others get to that other side.
Yeah, which is such an honorable thing. Yeah. I could go on about that, but yes.
Yes. So I was started like feeling overcome to sing Amazing Grace, which I had never really sung or knew the words of,
Mm.
besides like the basic Amazing Grace part. But I started singing it to her because I didn't know what to say. I just wanted her to like go. And she ended up leaving her body. My dad started singing it with me. And then after that, like a week later, I'm reading her journals, and in it, she had written that at her grandma's death, they sung Amazing Grace to her.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that is so like spiritual.
That is so incredible. Oh my gosh. And
So it was,
so divine order, the fact that when you came back and how you were when you came back and just all of that, the timing of everything. Yeah.
that's what it is truly, I would say, a walk with God, because then here my sister is calling me, the FBI is following me. I'm like, you're high. Then the
Yeah.
FBI calls me and they're like, hey, this is the FBI. We're looking for your sister. And I was
Oh,
like,
Lord.
I think you found her because she's pretty sure she's seeing you. And I thought she was lying. So then I ended up adopting my niece.
Oh,
And then I adopt my nephew for my other sister who was going down the same path. And by the grace of God, I had traveled, I had done my selfish experiences. So
yeah.
when I got the opportunity, it wasn't like I was thinking, well, I want to fucking do all this stuff for myself.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
well, I saw the world. It's great. The food's great. There's a sun in the sky,
You were ready. Like
but
you
these kids need help.
purposeful. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And spiritual calling, of course. I was waitressing at the time. I tell my table, hey, I got presented with this opportunity to adopt these kids. And how do you know? He was like, Oh, I actually got presented with an opportunity to adopt my brother's kids, and I didn't take it. But I went and opened a bunch of businesses, and I had my own kids, and my brother did better, and he never got to talk to those kids. They never got to meet each other, and it's my biggest regret. And I thought,
Wow.
ugh,
Chills.
I do not want that to be me.
Oh, wow. That's
So I took that
amazing.
as a sign of like, yeah, you'll definitely regret this choice. Shall you not show love and shall you be selfish instead? So I did it and it was the best thing for me. It grounded me. They've taught me so much. I had an abortion. So deeply I believed like, oh, I don't want kids, but really it was like, I don't deserve kids for what I've done. And
Mm.
so having God say, oh, no, you don't, you do deserve kids and you're really fucking great with them was
Yes,
very
yes, yes.
healing. Yeah.
Exactly. Like look
Yeah.
at again, I'm still getting to know you, but look at the community you've built and all the love and then, you're nurturing and just all the experience, these crazy life experiences you've had and how it's, you know, gonna heal everybody and yeah, yeah. All that
And
you
I think it just shows them that it's safe to be authentic. Like
Mhm.
for a long time, it was hard to maybe express where I've come from or where my sisters are, right? In some worldview of like, oh, people,
Shameful. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when I liberated myself from that construct, and I was like, just this is the cards I was
Yeah.
dealt.
This is what happened. Exactly.
It became so freeing.
Yeah.
So I had looked at some, just to get back to the question of how we open the studio. I had looked at some spaces, continuously in Lake Stevens, Smoky Point here, and I just couldn't find the space. Couldn't find the space. I ended up meeting my husband. He's amazing. The moment I met him, and I don't know if you had this with your husband. Did you know when you knew? Like when you met him, you know how they say that? They're like, when you know, you know. And I was like, yeah, fucking right. I thought
Well,
I've known, and I
Uh,
didn't.
I knew about it was like we were just friends and then I moved to Portland, but I knew when we started dating and it hit me in the stomach like a kamikaze and I was like, "Oh, I'm done. That's it." And it was like bam. Yeah. So
Yes. So that's like to me too, like when and you know, like it just, so when I met my husband, I had this weird, like deep respect for him. And I had never really had that for a guy, partially just because my biological dad was such a like handsome player, manly man. I'd be like, oh, I have a boyfriend. He's like, you're so pretty. You should have five boyfriends. Like
oh
throwing
no.
like just the worst advice you could give a daughter.
Yeah.
um, and this, I was just like, wow, something about this guy. So I got into my car, and then my mom's favorite song turned on when I turned on my car, and I was like, ah, shit, this is her sign. Like, this is the one. And she told me when she died, she was like, okay, if I can give you signs when you meet the right guy, I'm going to give you a sign. I'm like, okay, mom. I told myself I didn't want to work with ghosts, but you're the only ghost I'll work with. Okay.
What was the song? Do you remember?
I think it was what was her Martina McBride has one. It's like when I put on my feet on the hardwood ground. That's and it's Martina McBride. It's like a blue, I can see the album. It's like a blue cover behind her and she's wearing like an American flag shirt. But
Oh.
and so I knew I'm like, this is the guy. I better get my life together here. And so we end up getting married, getting together, and we didn't get married yet, but we got together. And he was like, wow, you have these two kids. They really need a father figure. You really need some grounding. Cause I'm still traveling at that time. I'm still like going to Costa Rica and trying to go every 3 months, going to Hawaii, just getting my travels and my selfish
Yeah.
desires. And a space comes open, and I'm pretty known in the community just from waitressing for years. So Jose owns a lot of property in Granite Falls, and they had reached out to me like, hey, are you still thinking of opening that yoga studio? Like, we just built the perfect space. And it was right across from where my great grandmother settled when she came here from North Carolina. And she had brought some trees in her purse with her and she had planted them.
Oh
And so
my gosh.
the fire station has this park behind it, and they had some trees that my great grandmother had planted. And so it's
Wow.
like, this is alignment. But then I'm nervous. So my human fear kicks in, and it's like, dude, there's no way a yoga studio in Granite Falls is going to be profitable. Like we have a 1-year-old baby. Like, this doesn't really make sense. It's not a good time.
Yeah.
Um, and my husband's like, oh man, really? You don't think it'll be profitable? I'm like, no. And then like the next day he comes back. He's like, you're such a liar. He's like, I believed you and all the like, oh, it's not going to be profitable. He's like, and then I started running the numbers and I was like, it can totally be profitable. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's so funny because I'd convinced myself, right? I had like just totally warped myself into like that fear cloak that no, it's not
Yes.
meant to be, it can't happen. And then by the grace of him as a companion, he was able to cut through that bullshit and be like, no, it can.
I mean, when you're following your calling or your joy or whatever you want to call it, there's no mistake that it'll just happen. I mean, so yes, having a partner and a cheerleader like that, we all need that. I mean, we are not that's the big lie is that we're separate and we have to do it alone. That is the huge lie that everybody's bought into, and it's total BS.
I love that. And I was listening to this thing the other day that said, like, if you wanted to take yourself to the next level, who do you need to work with?
Yes.
And I think the same thing with healing. It's like people are like, well, why can't I just heal by myself, like from reading books? I'm like, you can do some of it, but we're actually designed to need each other.
Yep.
And we have so many chemical releases that validate this by having human interactions that like it's so healthy for us to do things together. And my husband was the perfect partner. You can see a little bit of this space here. And he designed the space.
Yeah.
And designed the website. And I did the work of teaching yoga and pulling people in and loving people well and taking care of them and nurturing them. And to this day, we say that about our household. We have 7 people in our house, 5 kids. And so he always says, like, he designs the spaces and I fill them. And
Oh,
I just think that's such a great mount because space is important. It's important it makes you feel a certain way.
yeah, yeah.
And
Very
who's
true.
in the space with you is important.
Yeah, our house is 528 square feet and we have a bunch of cats and it's just full of love. And yes, we're tripping on each other and all of this, but you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, it's heaven.
It is. And you made it that way
Yeah.
by putting your touches into it and in that time and love.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. Um, we're gonna kind of start to wrap up here, but I have one burning question. Through your teaching at Wildwood, how many years have you been open?
We are on our 8th year. I think
That
it's
is
7th or 8th. So we ended up buying a building and moving 2 blocks away from that original studio we started at. By
okay.
the grace of God.
Yeah,
Again, just miracles happening.
and owning, that's incredible. And it's across the street from the pizza place.
Yep, yep. So someone called us and they were like, hey, this kid put an offer in on the old bike shop. You guys should call them and my dad, give them an offer just in case the other offer falls through. And we
Yeah.
were like, okay. So we did, and their offer fell through and they ended up taking ours. And to the month of our lease being up, we moved right in. So it was a seamless, I mean, unexpected. We had just bought a house. We had just moved into a house. That was the last thing on our list was to buy a building and renovate
Oh,
it.
well, and I think that's the lesson is that, and I have to keep reminding myself through this journey, is that it's not so much about doing all the things. Yes, you take inspired action, but also sometimes just sitting and being still and listening. Okay, what's the next right step? That is the way to go, as opposed to, oh, I need to do these 20 things in order to make this happen, and it's got to be hard. No, that's the lie.
I ask people that when I have people struggling in teacher training, when they're trying to heal something, I'll ask them like, well, what are your expectations on healing? Do you
Mhm.
expect it to be easy? Do you expect it to be hard? Do you expect it to be pleasureful? Do you expect it to be painful? Do you expect it to be short, long? And all of those constructs matter because how you believe is what will be.
Yeah.
And and so it just can't not be. So if you think it's going to be hard and it's going to be long, then fuck, quitting cigarettes is going to be a hard, long path. And you're right about that, honey. But if you can change that construct,
Yeah.
then maybe quitting cigarettes could be pleasurable. It could be fun. It could be funny. It could be quick.
Same thing with, work or changing your life or relationships or even dating,
Perspective is, and that's why people pay for a therapist, right? What's the start of a therapist is just to change your perspective, to know your perspective, and then start to tweak it just a little bit so that you'll have different results in your daily experience.
Yes, absolutely. Um, yes. Wow, I could talk to you all day. Because this is such good stuff. So, my burning question is through the yoga teacher training or opening the studio, have you had any like remarkable healings for yourself or for your students, that
Oh
you
my gosh, so many. Like when you say write a book, it's like I hope to one day write a book just about the profound opportunities. Healing for myself would just be having the community. Like I've said, my immediate family, besides my stepdad, my mom passed away, was kind of broken into shambles. And so that feeling of alone in the world has always kind of been there for me. I've always kind of maybe been on the outsider's perspective, on the fringes. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very much.
Yep. And my husband's the same way. So it's nice to have that relation and to understand each other in that sense. But the community is always there for me. And even if I don't want to teach, even if something is happening in my personal life and I'm like, "Oh my God, I have to go to the studio and teach." And I show up, they hold me. They hold me as much as I hold them. And they're so accepting and they're so loving and I'm like, oh my gosh, sorry guys, like I just took this phone call from my sister in prison. I can't pick to talk to her, but like she called me, 20 minutes for class. So I got to pick it up because I got to tell her our biological dad just died.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so here we go, like close our eyes and find our breath. And they're just like crying with me and they're letting me show up. And then at the end of it, they're like, that was such a great class. Like,
Yeah.
and it's beyond words, can't describe it. I've had a sick baby who was diagnosed with Hirschsprung's disease, and you show up at the studio and there's like flowers for you and
Oh,
your community's like reaching out to you. It's like just this, and that's not even just to me, it's like my other instructors to each other. they'll
yeah.
they'll celebrate together after they do challenges. They'll find a group of them and go out to lunch together. Like
Yes.
the just cross community of people who maybe don't have that strong of family or friends that find each other here is beyond healing and such a godsend for all of us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then through the teacher training, the most prominent one is I had this girl and I was working with teaching her the hatha sequence and she couldn't figure it out for the grace of her. And 3 months in, and I'm like, okay, eagle chair pose, eagle pose. And now you teach me. And she's like, oh man, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't like, why does she keep saying that? I don't know. I'm like, you do know. We literally have been doing this for 3 months. You do know. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. What did she not want to know? That
Ah,
in one moment she decided, I don't want to know this. And then that became her. And then now, every time someone asks her something, I don't know is her face, it's her mask, it's her front. So I
yeah.
said, okay, that's it. Drop down into meditation. Let's relax. And when did you not want to know? When did you stop knowing? And
Oh,
why
that's
did it serve
powerful.
you? And she starts crying, and I start crying, and I start feeling things in my hands, and I start feeling things in my body. And I'm trying to be grounded enough to continue to guide her through this experience. And I'm like, okay, like, what are you seeing? And she's like, okay. And she actually had been molested
Mm.
and she had never remembered this experience. And it hit her. And she came out of the meditation and we're crying together. And I'm telling her, like, oh, I felt this and I saw this. And she's like, I felt this and I saw this. And I sent her on her way. And the next day she calls me and she says, you won't believe what I fucking know. And I just started crying. And I was like,
Wow.
she comes and teaches the sequence literally every single pose she taught.
Oh,
And it was just that showed me like there's so much power in listening to what people say. And
yes.
there's a
Yeah.
reason why they say it the way they do. And
Yes.
my job is to sit with them long enough to feel that vibration of that one thing that's really in my intention and my prayer is always to like say what needs to be said to them to move their soul for the highest and best good for all, get them
Yeah.
on that path again. And I'll feel these things and I'll hear these things and I'll say, okay, oh, that's it. All right, that's it. Let's go into meditation with that. Why do you feel like you can't lead the class, you can't talk? Yeah. Or
Yeah.
like, why do you feel like you laugh every time you want to say a pose? Or if you make a mistake, like, where's that coming from? When's the first time we did that? What happened? What was there?
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't even, a lot of times we'll set up sessions and they won't even know, like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what this is. And I'm like, great. You know,
Let's
you don't
start
need to
there.
know because all
Yes.
you had to do was get here. And I guarantee, because anytime you want to make a big shift in your life, obstacles are going to come in the way to show you how
Yeah.
bad do you want it. And you got through all those obstacles to get here today. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. One of these questions is going to irk something in you, and we're just holding space for that to come up. Once it comes up, we'll do the processing together, and you'll know why you came here when you left. And
You know, I was gonna say what I hear you saying, like from the through line seems to be that the fact that you are vulnerable and you obviously create a safe space for everybody else to be vulnerable. The fact that you come in and you say, "Hey, this just happened. This familial thing just happened. Call from my sister. I had to disclose what happened with my biological father." All you as humans, like you can't look at someone else and know that their father just died. You can't see that. You can't see the fender bender they were just in. You can't see scars from radiation. Like there's all these things. And just the truth is that if you are unmasking in front of people, that allows them to unmask. And then, instead of just not understanding why we're so mean to each other all the time, why is that person so mean? Maybe they're in pain.
And I think as a teacher, I'll talk about that as like, all right, you're going to be teaching, and there's going to be people looking at you that are pissed off. They don't like the way you said something. They don't like that you're making a move. They don't like your music. They're just spewing this hate on you. And you're just going to take that. You're going to take that and you're going to wish them well because that's just them working through the true frustration with themselves
Mhm.
and whatever they're unhappy with in their own life. But you're just holding space for them in that way. And so
Mhm.
I think when we mirror each other, and so if the teacher can see that happening and then speak to that and speak to the energy they're picking up on, I think we are more alike than we are different.
100%. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the more we can understand that and just be honest about it, I think the previous cultures have always said like compose yourself and don't let people know this about you, don't let people know what's going on with the family. Like those were pretty strong repetitive patterning
Yeah.
that we got growing up. And I think now it's hopefully moving to the opposite, but I'm getting a lot of teenagers who have been coming in here asking, for a teenager kind of like healing or training because they're still in high school. And
Yeah.
they're having the same thing. They're like, well, my parents don't talk about their feelings. Like, I come in here and people are sharing and exposing themselves, and it feels so like, oh, wow. And I think it's important. I think it's important as women, especially, to sit with younger and older and be like, hey, this is going to happen to this. This is going to happen to this. If you're in a relationship, if you have kids, if you go through a cancer, like, I think we'll get to a climax where almost everybody is going to have an experience with cancer. It's just becoming so common, it will be a part of life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just the fact that, I mean, I can just speak to, my dad died of colon cancer. We have a very close friend. She died of colon cancer at 42.
Wow.
I could go on and on. We all could. But the fact that Ron and I, in the same year were diagnosed, he had prostate and I had breast, like, great. Our doctor is great. We have the same doctor, generally, like, but like, what? What is happening? Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. Although, now it's starting to. Yeah,
Yeah, in more ways than one, hopefully, like environmentally, mentally,
yeah.
spiritually, like
Spiritually, yep.
physically. There's so many different ways, levels of healing and understanding and things that can cause tension. And that's something that's so helpful for kids to hear and know that, like, just like birthing babies, when it was normal and out there, and then when it got pulled back and went into the hospital, and then nobody saw it and they were terrified to do it, and now it's kind of being pushed back out there again. Like, rawness in life is very important for the younger generation. So when they hit that
Yeah.
cancer, when they hit that birthing a baby, they have something that their mind can scan back and say, okay, all these people did it. They're okay. And
Yeah.
it doesn't seem so shocking. It's
Yes.
not going to
Yeah.
freeze them in time.
Yeah, I remember sitting in I could go on, but
Yeah.
sitting in the waiting room at the hospital and looking at the different, folks and there was a lot of despair, a lot of and I just and yes, I understand my experience is different from everybody else, my prognosis, but I just wanted to say to them, "Hey, it's going to be okay." Like what you focus on expands. So like just try to be in the moment and, just breathe.
Yeah. And take it one day, one moment at a time.
Mhm.
Like, I
Yeah.
know, yeah, just like you said, I know this is hard.
Yeah.
We can do this
Yeah.
together.
Uh, well, again, I could keep talking to you and we'll have to do this again.
Yes.
Is there anything else you would like the audience to know?
I think just just like you and I are both believers of, is like follow your path.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, set aside a time aside to get clear, to ask good questions. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to be a better you, and believe in you and believe in yourself. Love yourself. Take time to do the work, do the healing,
Yeah.
because when you do have that mind and body and spirit connection, that alignment, and you are living fully embodied, this life is a lot more beautiful. And even the hard things, you're going to move through them quicker, and they're not going to feel as hard, as when you have the baggage of the trauma and the past. When things hit you, you feel the weight of all that and whatever you're faced with. So I want to encourage you and inspire you and send love to you guys. Thank you for listening and being with us today. And hopefully you heard something that just shifted your soul, opened your eyes, and ignites your spirit to move in the highest and best way for your own self in this
Thank you
world.
for being here.
Thank
Oh my
you.
God, this is incredible. And I'll put in the show notes all the info about Wildwood and everything so people
And
can.
your books, girl. Get your books out there. Be like water. It's so great to be with you. I love chatting with you. I love seeing you. And I feel like I could talk to you forever. I just have that, like, something about you. Something
Yeah.
about you.
Oh, well, thank you. Oh my
Great to
goodness.
see you today.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm so grateful you were able to join us today. Please share and like and review this podcast. Also, if you have any comments or questions about anything, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at juliettericci@gmail.com, and info is in the show notes. Till next time, have a great week.